Good afternoon, family. This is Tony Browder welcoming you to the first edition of the Browder File. I am your host, Tony Browder. And before I get into today's program, there are several people that I would like to thank. I would like to extend a note of thanks to Nkechi Taifa, who was the host of Human Rights and Justice. She was in this time slot for 2 years and allowed me to substitute host for her on a number of occasions as she was traveling around the country. But she opened the door for me to host my own show. I also would like to acknowledge Sister Katia Stitt, Program Director of WPFW, who welcomed me as a programmer to the station and helped me prepare for my duties and responsibilities of hosting a new program. So thank you very much, Sister Katia. Also, I'd like to thank Miyuki Williams, the interim program director for WPFW. I thank her for her hard work to keep this station on the air. She's been working tirelessly on the most recent fund drive, and she's working also to help secure a new location for the station as we prepare to move next month. You know, I've listened to WPFW for at least 4 decades, at least 40 of the 47 years that it's been in existence. And I credit a number of former programmers who inspired me as a listener, who informed me and helped to shape my consciousness. So I want to acknowledge them. I want to acknowledge Vince Godwin, Brother Kalonji Olusegun, who was a host on PFW for a number of years. Also, Brother Kojo Olahunio, who was part of the morning reading team. Brother Vince and Brother Kojo were part of the very first study group that I participated in back in 1977. So I am who I am because of these two brothers who spent a lot of time with me and taught me about media, taught me about African history and culture, and helped to shape the voice that you're listening to right now. I also want to acknowledge Brother Hadari Ali, who had a spot on PFW on Thursday mornings. I knew Hadari from my time at Howard University, and he opened a Pyramid Bookstore, which for a number of years was the largest, the only chain of Black bookstores in the country. Brother Hadari had famous Pyramid Books on Georgia Avenue on the corner of Georgia and Harvard Street, as well as several other bookstores throughout the District of Columbia and his hometown of San Diego. I have to acknowledge another brother who is a giant here in the DC community. He's a radio personality. He also was an attorney. He also was a minister and a phenomenal civil servant, and that is Brother Ambrose Lane, who had a daily show, a weekly show on PFW, and hit me on numerous times, as well as a number of scholars and folk in the community who were responsible for sharing information that helped to make DC what it was back in the day. Another person who I have to acknowledge who was an integral part of my life is Lauren Cress Love. She was a former station manager of WPFW. She also had a talk show. And I recall when I published Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization in 1992, I did an interview with Lauren and discussed that book. And it was one of the best interviews that I've ever done. Lauren is a wonderful sister. And as we know, or as we should know, she was the elder sister of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. I also want to acknowledge Brother Bay, who was a character, who was a personality who was known, well known here at WPFW and several other radio stations. He was a close friend and ally to Dick Gregory. He had one of the first vegetarian restaurants in Baltimore and opened up a facility right next door to WL when they were located on 8th Street. And so we acknowledge Brother Bay today, and also want to acknowledge Tom Porter. Tom Porter is still with us. The other souls that I mentioned earlier have outrun us to become ancestors, as Brother Bay would say. But it's important for me to acknowledge the people who are responsible for me being here. I am who others have helped to shape, and I'm grateful for everyone who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself and helped to nurture my development. I also want to thank two current programmers at WPFW who often had me on as a frequent guest on their shows, and that's Joni Eisenberg and Brother Kaba. They are two souls, two old friends who are near and dear to me, and who I always have come to rely on as confidants, as people who can give me good advice about any subject matter that I come to them to discuss. And I want to acknowledge a special thank you to the 8% of the listeners of WPFW who have supported this station with their financial contributions over the past 47 years. The station just completed a fund drive, and as had been mentioned numerous times on the show, on various shows by various programmers, that only 8% of the people who listen to this station make a financial contribution. And I'm trusting that when I participate in my first fund drive early next year, that I'll be able to meet my quota, that the people who say that they appreciate my writings, my presentations, and who will hopefully come to appreciate this show, the Browder File, will make a contribution and will help keep this station on air for at least another 47 years. This show is called The Browder File, which is the name of my first book, which was entitled From the Browder File. That book was written 35 years ago, and it was the result of my very first appearance on the Kathy Hughes morning show 38 years ago this month. And I was invited on the show to talk about history, to talk about culture, to talk about the things that mean the world to me. And after my initial show, I received a phone call from Dr. Frances Murphy, who was working at Howard at the time, in Howard School of Communication. She called me up to ask me if I would be willing to write an article for the newspaper that she was the publisher of. Her family, the Murphy family, started the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper, and she was responsible for bringing to DC the Washington Afro-American newspaper. So Dr. Murphy asked me if I would write an article about one of the topics that I discussed with Ms. Hughes, and that topic was the creation of the Negro. And we spoke for about a half an hour. And at the end of that conversation, Dr. Murphy convinced me to write a regular column for the Washington Afro-American newspaper, a bi-weekly column for the Afro. And that column was appropriately called From the Browder File. I wrote for them for 2 years before I took 22 of my favorite essays and updated the information, incorporated a graphic to accompany each essay, and I published my first book, From the Browder File, which has been in circulation for 36 years. The Browder File is still a perennial bestseller. And one of the things that has made that book so well loved by so many people is because it's an introduction to various aspects of African and African American history and culture. But I want to share with those who may be new to me, and all of you all are new to the show, but there's some people who are just hearing me for the first time, that my interest in history was initiated by a meeting with Dr. Ivan Van Sertima 47 years ago, 47 years ago this past February. I went to hear Dr. Van Sertima as he was speaking at Georgetown Law School on New Jersey Avenue. And he was talking about his book, which he had just published in 1976, book entitled They Came Before Columbus, The African Presence in America. And I was awestruck by Van Sertima's intellect, by his command of the knowledge. And he discussed the fact that there were Africans from the Nile Valley who built ships, navigated the Nile River, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Atlantic Ocean, and landed in the Americas, in Mexico, and had numerous interactions with the indigenous population in Mexico. Hence the title of the book, They Came Before Columbus. Van Sertima shared images of statues that were made of these Africans who traveled to the Americas 2,500 years before Christopher Columbus was born. They came before Columbus. The Africans were the they that was referenced in the title of that book. And it was clear from these images that these statues, that we were looking at the face of African people. Some of these statues are 7 feet in height, 15 feet in diameter, and were clearly the images, the facial features of African people. I had the pleasure of traveling to Mexico with Van Sertima twice to visit the Olmec region, to see the Olmec pyramids, the Olmec heads, the Olmec temples, and the Olmec tombs. And what I learned from that initial meeting with Dr. Van Sertima on February the 21st, 1977, what I took away from that lecture was something that blew my mind. And that was Dr. Van Sertima telling the audience that the ancient Egyptians were Black people. Now, this surprised me because I had never heard anyone tell me in my entire life that the ancient Egyptians were Black. And this information contradicted everything that I had read in every textbook. It contradicted every film that I had seen on television or in the theater. And Van Sertima showed images of the ancient Egyptian people, the Kemetic people, as African people. And I realized at that moment, as I was listening to this brilliant man who I'm honored to say was my friend, I realized at that moment that I had been lied to all my life by teachers in elementary school, high school, and college. And because of the fact that I grew up in Chicago, I came here in 1971 to attend Howard University. Many of the people who were responsible for lying to me were people who looked just like me. And it dawned on me that these were not malicious people, that they didn't intentionally set out to miseducate me. People only know what they know. And if you have a limited interpretation of history, you can only impart that limited understanding of history to those that you encounter. So that made me aware of the fact that I needed to assume responsibility for re-educating myself. And I took that job very seriously. I began studying Egyptian history for the past 47 years. I've had the pleasure and the honor of traveling to Egypt over the past 44 years. And I've been to Egypt 68 times during that time frame. I've had the honor, the distinction, the unique distinction of funding and participating in excavations in Egypt for the past 15 years. So I had no idea 47 years ago when I met Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, I had no idea of the extent to which that initial meeting would transform my life. So I am eternally grateful. And I've come to understand the power of knowledge, of history, of culture, of information to transform one's consciousness. And what I've sought to do throughout my career over the past 45 years now is to share that experience with others, to help expand their lives. And so this show, the Browder File, will focus on history. This show, the Browder File, will focus on ancestry, the ancestry of people of African descent. This show will focus on the media, which is the most powerful form of mass communication ever invented. The media, television, radio, film, the internet, social media has the capacity to influence millions of people in a matter of minutes. We also are going to be talking about current events and information news that's designed to enlighten and empower. I want to talk about current events. I want to talk about news that doesn't give us the blues, but news that gives us a foundation that we can build upon. You heard at the top of the show the theme music for the Browder File. And that theme, the name of that theme song is Black Nile, which was written by Wayne Shorter. And this particular version of Black Nile is performed by Gregory Porter. The lyrics that Gregory Porter sang were written by Wayne Shorter. And I want to share those lyrics with you so that you can understand how these words embody what has driven me and what will be the foundation for this show. The lyrics say, hey, come along with me and let your spirit run free along the old Black Nile. Take my hand and see creations planned along the Black Nile. My ancestry and history is calling me. Come on, let's see just how it used to be. Hey, come along with me. Let your spirit run free along the Black Nile. So the Black Nile is literally the river that ran through the land of Black people, ran through Ethiopia, the land of the Black people, ran through Kush, the nation of the Black people, ran through Kemet, the nation of the Black people. So the Black Nile is about the history and culture of a people who have been written out of the respectable commentary of history. We've been socialized still to this very day to believe that Kemet, the country that the Greeks renamed Egypt, is not in Africa, it's somewhere in the Middle East, that culture, the oldest documented culture and civilization known to mankind, had nothing to do with indigenous African people. These are falsifications of the historical record, which Van Sertima dedicated his life to correcting, which other scholars, John Henry Clark, Asa Hilliard, Dr. Ben, Dr. Welsing, James Small, so many others, John Jackson, have dedicated their lives, Chancellor Williams have dedicated their lives to correcting historical falsehoods. And that's what I intend to do on my show, The Browder File. So as I was preparing for this show, it dawned on me that my very first program was going to be the day after the presidential election. And to be honest with you, I didn't want to talk about the election. I didn't want to talk about politics, primarily because I'm not a political scientist, and there are people more skilled to discuss this subject matter, to analyze the outcome of this election than I. And so I'm going to leave that to them. I'm going to stay in my lane and do what I know to do best. But I also want to share with you that I knew deep down in my soul that the outcome of this election wasn't going to be good. And as I, shared my concerns with people close to me, they would tell me, Tony, don't say that. Or Tony, don't put that out there. And I had to remind them it was not a matter of me putting it out there. It was a feeling that I had based on my study of history, world history, European history, my study of American history. And so I had a different understanding of what this election could be. And so I saw a future that's going to impact us for the next 4 years based on my study of the past. And so what I know is that this day was coming, and I had to prepare myself for this day and the after effects of this day, because it will stay with us for the rest of our lives. One of the things that I loved about John Henry Clark was the fact that he said that all history is a current event. The things that are happening now are a direct result of things that were set in motion 5 years ago, 500 years ago, 5,000 years ago. All history is a current event. And when you study history, you begin to see certain cycles or patterns in history which repeat themselves, sometimes on a daily basis or a weekly basis, a monthly basis, maybe over centuries or millennia, but history follows specific patterns. And what I have learned through my study of history is that there is nothing new in the world except the history you do not know. So there are so many people who are upset about the outcome of this election, who are disappointed. And I can only say the only reason you're disappointed is because you don't understand American history. You don't understand how racist this country is, and that it's not going to change overnight. So by understanding the nature of this nation, we can better understand and project into the future certain outcomes. And that's what people do. That's why I've learned to be a student of history, a student of world history, a student of American history, and a student of African history. I study the past because I understand that the past is prologue. And anyone who's ever gone down to the National Archives and entered that building from the rear of the building, the northern side of the building that faces, I think it's Pennsylvania Avenue, that is the entrance for scholars, researchers. And as you walk into the entrance of the National Archives, you walk past two statues. There's a statue on the left of a woman sitting on a block of stone, writing. And the inscription beneath her says, "What is past is prologue." To the right of the entrance is the statue of a man holding a book in his hand, and written on the pedestal beneath him is the statement, "Study the past." And so those two statues are not there at the archives by accident. They are there to remind those coming to do research in this building, in this institution. It reminds them that what is past is prologue. History tells you what has happened, what is going to happen. And so you study the past in order to get an understanding of what's coming at you so that you can better prepare for that. And so I understand through my study of history that not everybody is going to make it. Not everyone has an appreciation for history, primarily because of the fact that they're shackled to principles, concepts, and ideas that are in direct opposition to their thinking, to how they've been socialized. And many of these thoughts and ideas are part of a programming that is designed to erase the African consciousness within people. And so the answer to our problems, the answer to the problems of Africans living in America specifically, is and will always be, as Dr. Asa Hilliard said, our answer is to be African or not to be. It is who we are. It is in our DNA. It is what has been stripped away from us. And as a result of the erasure of our memory of Africa, we don't have an appreciation for it. And so when I talk about our memory of Africa, I'm not limiting those memories to our enslavement, to the theft of millions of African people. I'm talking about going back to a time thousands of years ago when Africans were the first human beings on the planet, going back to the time when Africans began walking out of Africa and populated Asia and populated Europe, going back to a time when we had the oldest civilizations known to mankind. That knowledge and information should be taught to everybody, not just people of African ancestry, but everybody, because on a very basic and fundamental level, everybody in this society, everybody in this world is of African ancestry. And so the idea is to understand what it means to be African in mind, body, and spirit. These perceptions of what it means to be African need to be refined and redefined. And it can only be found by going back to the source, the original source material, and tracing our migrations from the Nile to the Niger to our very own neighborhoods. And when we apply that knowledge, and I'm a person who has lived his life with the understanding that knowledge is meant to be studied and utilized, applied in your life, and you understand what works and what doesn't work. You keep what works and you jettison that which doesn't work. And through the application of that knowledge, it helps you build Black better. And as a person of African ancestry, that's my primary interest. That's my primary concern, to build a better quality of life for people of African ancestry. Last Saturday, we closed our 2024 Egypt on the Potomac field trip season. And we had over 110 people who traveled to DC from all over the country to participate in that Egypt on the Potomac field trip. We've been conducting these field trips for 36 years now. And we're preparing for our 2025 field trip season by opening the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project, which will showcase the presence of African people in world history and help make our 2025 field trips even better. I'm all about applying knowledge, learning new knowledge, applying knowledge to help us do what we do better. And last Saturday evening, I had the opportunity to give a talk on King Tut at a facility in Northeast DC, which is currently exhibiting 10,000 artifacts from the tomb of King Tut. I used that occasion, which was Saturday, the 2nd of November, which was All Souls Day, to discuss the ancient African concepts of the soul and what it means to have a soul, and the things that these African people did along the Black Nile to prepare their soul to be reborn, to prepare their souls to come forth by day, to come forth into a new life. And so I have found that African history and culture is all around us, but we just don't know it's African. It's been used, it's been appropriated by others to lift themselves up, while at the same time, we've been taught that we are not African, or that Africa has not given anything of value to the world. These are myths, these are lies that need to be challenged. And one of the duties, one of the responsibilities of this program, the Browder File, is to challenge those lies with knowledge, with information, with documented facts. I'm not hosting this show to proselytize and talk about all the great things that we've done. I want to talk about information that has intentionally been withheld from the public, specifically young people, information that has the capacity to shape our consciousness. So I know from my own personal experiences that we are where we are because of who was responsible for putting information in our heads. And as Dr. Carter G. Woodson dedicated his life to overcoming the intentional miseducation of people of African ancestry. So we have an obligation, we have a responsibility to assume responsibility for educating ourselves, educating our family members, and educating everyone in our community so that we can build Black better. We're responsible for educating ourselves. We're responsible for maintaining our community and supporting those organizations and institutions within our community that are deserving of our support. And to the extent to which we know that is the extent to which our organizations within our communities, our educational institutions, our media institutions will thrive. We have to assume responsibility. We have to assume ownership of those things that add value in our life and ensure that those institutions will be viable and share these experiences with our children, with our grandchildren, so that they are clear about who they are and what they have the capacity to do, so that they will continue to become the best examples of human beings possible. So that's my commitment to life. That's my commitment to the Browder File and WPFW. That's my commitment to you, my listeners. And I invite you to come along with me. Take a journey along the Black Nile so that we can learn who we are, apply what we've learned, and use that knowledge to make our lives better. And in the process of making our lives better, we will ultimately make our communities and our world better. And that's something that we all have the capacity to do. And to the extent to which we assume ownership and responsibility for those responsibilities, others cannot control us. Others cannot influence us. It is a power that helps us draw people to us, draw politicians to us who will serve our interests as opposed to the interests of corporations and institutions that may not have our best interests at heart. So it's 5:30, it's the bottom of the hour. You're listening to the Browder File. I'm Tony Browder, and this is WPFW 89.3 FM. And so switching gears, those who are familiar with me and my work know that I am an artist. I have a background in design and advertising and architecture, marketing and media. Those who know me know that I love film, and I've gained a reputation for analyzing classic films such as Avatar or Black Panther or The Woman King. And so we'll have programs in the future where I will discuss films and media and other art forms. But today I have an honor and an opportunity to introduce to you as my first guest, a brother, a writer, uh, and a director of one of my favorite films, Devil in the Blue Dress. And that person, that director, is Mr. Carl Franklin. So, Carl, welcome to the Browder File, brother. How are you?
Hey, thank you, brother. I'm good. Yeah, I'm all right.
You're all right. Well, I'm glad to hear you're all right, because many people that I've been talking to today are not so all right.
You got to be all right, brother.
Yeah, you got to be all right.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
So listen, man, you've done some incredible work. As I said, Devil in the Blue Dress is one of my favorite films. Denzel Washington is one of my favorite actors. Denzel acted his behind off in that film. But for me personally, the real star of that film is Don Cheadle. From the moment Don comes on the scene, the film just has this energy, this electricity, and it takes off. So let me ask you, man, what prompted you to dedicate your life to filmmaking?
You know, actually, I never thought about dedicating my life to film. I kind of fell into it by accident. You know, I kind of was doing it before I actually thought, well, this is what I really want to do. You know, I was a history major in college, and you know, when you do your requirements, those general requirements in college, you have a choice as to whether you want to do, you have an English requirement. And so there's English 1A, there's comparative literature 1A, and there's dramatic art 1A to satisfy those requirements, at least at the college I went to.
Where'd you go to school?
UC Berkeley.
Okay.
So at any rate, I figured, you know, English 1A was essays, that'd be a drag. You know, comparative literature would be, you know, again, probably some dry kinds of whatever, I don't know, short stories or something. And I thought it'd be a lot more fun to do, to read plays. And the teacher, the TA at the time was a Black woman by the name of Margaret Wilkerson. And she put me in a play, and I enjoyed it. And then the head of the department saw it, and they kept telling me I should do that. And so, you know, I was in it because, you know, a lot of the girls in theater were, you know, so I was there for that. And the next thing I know, I got an opportunity to come to New York at Joseph Pabst Public Theater. And at the time when I was working, when I was acting on stage, I didn't know that there was a connection between stage and film. I got back there because, you know, I hadn't seen a lot of plays and whatever. And I got back there and I saw that George C. Scott and, you know, various other people from other Black actors, you know, Louis Gossett, et cetera, Robert Hooks, all who had worked at the Negro Ensemble. Ossie Davis,
Ruby
D, you know, who had been at the Negro Ensemble in New York. And I saw that they had done films. And that's when I realized that there was a connection.
Okay.
But at any rate, I didn't actually get into film until I got back to California. You know, I left because there was an emergency in the family, and I didn't have enough money to get back to New York. So, you know,
so destiny kind of pulled you back,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
to your true destiny. But look, let me ask you before I move on with the conversation. You were a history major. What area of history were you studying?
Well, I was at the European history at the time.
Okay.
I didn't know, you know, I don't remember if they even had African history opportunity there.
Okay.
So I was just, you know, reading about European history, the Renaissance and Middle Ages, and all of that kind of thing, you know, the Enlightenment period and whatever. I just was into the past, you know, into, and political science. I was into that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, man, but let me ask you this, man, because I have a great appreciation for film, primarily because of my background in design and advertising. And I understand the capacity of film to shape consciousness. Can you share with our listeners some inside information from you as a director and as a writer, are films really designed to impact people on an emotional level? And how, if so, how is that accomplished?
You know, first of all, when you are dealing with a movie or, a film, television, whatever, any of the dialogue that's in the film, any of the scenes that you inserted into the film, they represent much more. You're taking somebody's life, or it's an event that might take, say, a week, 2 weeks, a month, years, and boiling it down to 2 hours. And so that means that each one of those choices that you make is there to communicate something important in that person's life or in
Each
that
scene
story.
in the film.
Each scene, each line in the
Okay,
film
each
is there
line.
to communicate something important. Even if it seems like it's a throwaway, it still should be something that gives you some insight into that character.
Okay.
And so by virtue of that, you are automatically drawing people into something that is a little bigger than life. And that in itself has a certain kind of an impact on people, where they actually start to value that more than they would if it's just an overheard conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And add to that in film, the imagery. And so now you're in a place where you're looking at moving images of people. And our whole objective is to what we call suspend your disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
You come in knowing you're seeing a film, knowing that it's not real. Our job is to take that away from you and to make you feel that it is real, to get you to actually react to emotionally in the way that you would if you were watching something actually happening.
Okay, so you feel what the characters in the film are feeling.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
So what are some of the techniques that a writer or a film director would use to evoke that emotion within the audience?
First of all, a structure is how you bring people into the film.
Okay.
It's also the choice of the shots, how you shoot it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you are subjective in your shots with your characters or objective and seeing the world in its total, or a kind of a bird's eye view of things.
Okay.
So, depending upon what your message is, depending upon how you want to affect your audience, that's the decision is made. You make that decision based on that.
Mm-hmm. So let's do a breakdown, if we can, on a scene from Devil in the Blue Dress.
Okay.
Can you select a scene,
Yeah.
any scene, and talk about how you orchestrated that scene and the emotional outcome that you wanted the audience to have from a particular scene?
Well, I take the first scene,
Okay.
which was the opening, where you're on Central Avenue, and you're seeing the scope of it with all of those cars. Because first, what I want to do is to get you to believe in the time period and to transport you back to 1948.
Okay.
And so seeing all of those cars coming, et cetera, going with the character. There was a woman who was an extra,
Mm-hmm.
followed her across the street. And then we went up into the window of the place that we had created a bar in.
Mm-hmm.
But what that does, by keeping that as one shot, now, because otherwise I could have shot it where I was outside doing an exterior and then cut to the inside.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of feel that that's a little bit of a cheat.
Okay.
But if you actually follow someone in, then you're really in that area, that bar exists in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look out the window and you see the buses and whatever, and then suddenly, whoa, you're in it. And so that was the purpose of it, is to start with a subjective thing, just to get you into the mood,
mm-hmm.
And into into the environment.
Sure.
So that you get lost in it.
Well, I recall on numerous instances discussing film, people would tell me, Tony, you're reading too much into it. It's just a movie.
Yeah.
So is a movie really just a movie? Or when does a film become something more than just a film?
I think, it's always tries to be more than just a film. Even if it's a comic book kind of film, it still wants to be more than just a movie.
Mm-hmm.
You still want to affect your audience and give them an experience that they can't have on their own without being in that theater with those people and with those characters on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I think to the extent the more authentic you are in terms of actually going into real emotions, real conflicts, real psychological disturbances. All of that gives you more gravity, but it always should feel like it's more than just a film, at least for the time that you're actually watching it.
All right, well, let me ask you, can you give me, share with my audience some examples of films that did that very well?
Chinatown.
Chinatown.
Godfather.
Okay.
Godfather 1 and 2. I thought Sleep with Anger, Charles Burnett's Sleep with Anger did it well. His Killer of Sheep did it as well. There've been a lot of films that have done it, man,
So, I'm a history buff, and I learned that you are a history buff too. How have you seen the film industry evolve or devolve? What's your take on the state of films now? Are they similar to some of the classic films that you just referenced, Godfather 1 and 2, Chinatown? Are that quality of filmmaking still being replicated today, or have we shifted?
I don't, when you said that quality of film, let's think about it not as a vertical scale, but as a different kind of experience. What has happened is that once, I guess it was Entertainment Tonight, started publicizing the grosses, then how much money a movie made suddenly became synonymous with whether it was a good or a bad movie.
Got it.
If it was successful, it was kind of recognized as a good film. And so what happened is you started to look for an audience that would, a kind of a common denominator. You started to attack the audience in a different way. And another thing that started to happen was you had, they looked at where is the money? Okay. Well, grown-ups, you got, kids, you got a mortgage, you got, car payments, you got, insurance payments, you have tuition you got to pay and things like that. So you're not necessarily looking to be the first on your block to see a movie. But a kid's money is liquid.
Okay.
If they got their allowance, that's there to be spent. So you see a lot of things being directed toward young people. And because of the level of sophistication of young people, or lack of, however you want to see it,
sure,
the film business has started to shift the art has started to shift from you directing the purpose, instead of it being toward your heart, toward your head and your heart, a lot of it is toward your adrenal system.
Your emotions.
Well, no, it's more toward like what you experience when you're on a roller coaster ride.
Okay.
It's more of that. Before, it was much more about emotions, when you were going toward the heart, when you were actually trying to get people and work them toward catharsis. Now, that's not necessarily the thing that's happening.
Okay.
Folks really wanted for people to go in and feel like that they've actually been to Magic Mountain, or that they've been to, an amusement park.
It's kind of like advancing the virtual reality, where they pull you into the action on the screen, and you feel as though you're an active participant.
See, what's happening is technology has started to become a much bigger, it has a much bigger role now. In fact, now they have these things where you put the headphones on these glasses and whatever, and you literally in a virtual world.
Sure.
And so that's going to take over. That's the next thing.
Okay.
What we know as the old theater experience is that's, kind of feels like it's becoming a lost art.
Okay.
That communal experience of everybody being together in one room and sharing the same experience and feeding off of that emotion that is contagious.
Sure.
And that's something that goes all the way back to when people used to gather around the fire.
Yes.
Back in ancient times, and the griot, the storyteller, would tell the stories, and everybody would somehow, that would bring them together. Now that doesn't seem to be the purpose.
Okay.
It seems to be much more of an individual, balkanized kind of, intent.
So the essence of the experience is still rooted around storytelling.
Yeah, well, yes, but story is kind of less important now than imagery. With the advent of MTV and all of the music videos and all of that, you'll see a lot more kind of quick imagery, because people have a shorter attention span.
Okay, the jump edits.
Yeah, the jump edits and just the barrage of shots, et cetera, et cetera. And the film language is different now too. It used to be like, for instance, I like to save my close-ups as punctuations, but people use the close-ups now where you'll see, they just, all the shots are close-ups and a lot of times. And so the vocabulary, what do you call that? When you commas and periods and all of that.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not an English major. I can't help you out.
But anyway, all that stuff is now not as important. It's a whole different, usage.
So how long have you been in the film industry?
Oh man, getting me to tell my age.
Well, ain't nothing wrong with that, man.
All right. I did the first film that I was in was in 1972.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a student, and they had me photo double somebody.
What does that mean, photo double?
Well, where they had shot somebody and that person wasn't available, and so they wanted to shoot you from behind.
Okay.
The person had been a principal in the film.
Sure.
But they didn't get a shot where they needed to see that person from behind, and I was built like that person.
Got it.
So yeah.
Okay.
That was the first time I was on film.
So you've been in this industry for over 50 years, right? Where would you, as an artist, as someone who has a genuine love for this craft, and it is a craft, it's an art, where would you like to see this media going? Or what type of film projects mean something of value to you?
I think, Black, kind of historical, Black material, Black history.
Okay, going back to your roots.
Yeah, because, we don't get it in school. We don't, and unfortunately, a lot of people get their history from television and film.
True.
They don't get it from books. They don't get it from professors, et cetera. They get it from watching television primarily. And so I would like to see, things that have a lot more gravity and a lot of things that are more authentic in terms of Black history. I'd like to see those kinds of things done more. And, I've been offered several times, they've wanted me to do things that deal with slaves, where they're kind of, where you see Black people in a situation where they're struggling. I want to see us winning. I want to see people, more in charge. I want to see what we do to overcome the struggle. Those kinds of movies I'd like to see, because that's our history.
What would it take to produce those types of films?
It takes money.
Okay, that's the operative word. And I would assume a good script. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So let me ask you.
Not necessarily a good script, but a script that somebody with money feels is a good script.
All right. So that means that a lot of films, a lot of scripts out here may not necessarily be good, but somebody thought it was and invested their money in that.
It is, yeah.
So let me ask you, what were your thoughts on the film Black Panther?
Black Panther was interesting, because I don't normally go to those kind of tentpole action hero films, but this one had a story, which was really interesting. And I felt that the central theme in the end was for people who are oppressed. You had two characters. You had one, and who finally have the power. How do you deal with that? Do you exact revenge on the folks who have kept you down, or do you show forgiveness and look to the future? And that seemed to be what we had at the end, where you had the Michael B. Jordan character and had the Chadwick Boseman character.
Sure.
But you actually both had their
strong points and weak points.
Yeah, both had strong cases for their points of view, and emotionally, either way you would have been affected if Chadwick had been vanquished, that would have affected you really strongly. And I was quite affected by when Michael B. decided to kill himself. That was strong.
Well, given that Nile Valley culture, Nile Valley civilization is important to both of us, because I first met you at a lecture Minoko Rashidi and I were doing in California a number of years ago. What do you think it would take to do a film about Nile Valley civilization and do it right? What do you think it would take?
Oh, I've written one, man, and we raised $120 million. I'm not going to go any further than that, but our star backed out on this, and it was not Denzel. I just say that. I don't think he would, but You know, I won't say who it was, but at
Okay.
any rate, we actually were, and it was something that dealing with the 25th dynasty,
Which
dealing
is
with
my area of
tobacco.
interest,
Yeah,
25th Dynasty. So
yeah.
do you think a well-written, a well-produced, well-directed film that depicted a point in time in world history when African people were on top, do you think that film would have a favorable impact on the African American or the African people of African descent who saw that film?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, all you have to do is look at what has had a negative effect on us.
Mm.
You know, if you go back to any movie going beyond earlier than 1950,
Mm-hmm.
you know, every character that you see in there that's black is something that you are ashamed of.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, it's like, and that, you know, that's exported around the world. And so
Sure.
people who have never met black people, this is their
Yeah,
introduction.
exactly.
And so, you know, you can, you know, people can have a very negative attitude toward you and actually discriminate mentally against you without having ever met you,
Yeah.
you know.
So that speaks to what I had mentioned earlier in this conversation about the power of film to shape consciousness.
Yeah, yeah.
People can despise you or be afraid of you simply because of the perceptions of you that they've seen
Yeah.
in the media. So um, how would you, how would you, what advice would you give to a young filmmaker entering this industry?
Just to start making movies on your own. Nowadays, you know, you can make a low budget film.
Yeah.
I mean, extremely low budget movie yourself. People are shooting films on their iPhone.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I mean, especially with digital now, you know, it's a lot less expensive. There's some digital cameras you can get for a few $1,000s that are, and you know, you get a couple players together and you've got a movie. You know, look at something like the Blair Witch Project, which only took
That's
like
true.
about $40,000 to make.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Spike did She's Gotta Have It for like $18,000. Robert Rodriguez did El Mariachi for like 7. You know,
Mm-hmm.
then I think they would in post they added, you know, effects and whatever, and it was more expensive. Wayne Wang's Chan is Missing was only $18,000.
Mm.
And of course, that was, you know, back in the 80s and early 90s.
Sure.
But now, you know, that the equipment has gotten a lot less or a lot less expensive and a lot more available to people. You know, you can do it pretty inexpensively.
Okay.
And people are doing that.
People are doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you
Yeah.
think they're doing it well? Because I've seen, you mentioned you can shoot a picture on the iPhone. I've seen many documentaries done by people who have a camera and think that they're a director, think that they're an actor. So they've kind of muddied the water. The technology has been an asset and a liability.
Right, yes.
So there's an art, there's a craft that I would think people also need to become acquainted with and master in order to use this technology for good.
Yeah, and the only way, unfortunately, to find that out is to do it.
Okay.
You know, I mean, one of the things, what's positive, you know, it's negative in a lot of ways that, you know, a lot of people who don't have the skills and don't necessarily have a noble intent, that they have access now. But what is good about it is become a much more egalitarian situation, because a lot of people who don't have money, who don't have the kind of money, the millions of dollars to do a film, now can actually express themselves, for a lot less money.
Okay. So as we wind down, I only have a minute or so left in the show. What is your prize project? What would you like to do at this point in your life?
What would I like to do? I have a project over at Netflix on the rise and fall of the Black Panther Party. I would like to do that.
Ooh, okay.
You know, I'd like to do that. I also like My Last Pharaoh. I like that too. I'd love to do that. Those are my two
dream
jewels
projects
that I would love to get done. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there is a producer out here with the resources and who wants to invest in a film that could have a favorable impact on the world. And hopefully they have an appreciation for your immense talent and can come to you to make you an offer that you can't refuse.
Yeah, they've been doing that, brother, but it's not for the things that I want.
How do you deal with that, man?
Hey, it's like everybody's got a price.
That's true.
I shouldn't say that, but yeah, I'm being cynical now.
Mm-hmm.
And you know it when you hear it.
Okay. I hear you. I hear you.
I often say that, I shouldn't say that. I'm not gonna say this.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good. Well, look, man, we're just about at the top of the hour. And I want to thank you for making my first show, this first edition of the Browder File, a special edition. I appreciate your work, and I know that what you do is not easy, but you've been consistent. You have integrity, and I trust that you have future opportunities to make the films that have meaning and value to you, and that you're able to produce a product that will have meaning and value to everyone who puts their eyes on the screen and internalizes what you've created. That's how we can move forward. And given where we are right now, mentally and emotionally, we need something that's going to lift our spirits and help us move forward. So really, it's all about moving forward, and it's about moving forward by looking back. In Ghana, they call that Sankofa. You look back, you study the past, you take the examples of your successes and your failures, and you apply that knowledge as you move forward in order to create a world that your children will want to inherit. And at the same time, you engage your children in that process. So they understand who they are, and they understand the value of history. And I can wind down with my favorite line from Black Panther, where T'Challa's father tells him that any father who has not prepared his child for his death has failed as a father. And it's our responsibility as parents, as adults, to model for our children, and even if you don't have children, to model for your nieces, your nephews, and people in your community how men and women should speak and think and walk and talk and conduct themselves, because they have an understanding that we're more than just these physical bodies, and that we're here for a purpose. So I feel very strongly it's about, living your life with a purpose. And those in the media, such as you, have an obligation and a responsibility and numerous opportunities to give people purpose that adds value to their lives and shapes the lives of souls that have not even been born. So I see the work that you do, man, as sacred on one level. It's a mission, it's a cosmic assignment, as Dr. Welsing often said, that helps to put us on a path to total freedom and justice. And that's what this life is about. So, we're winding down my first show, the first of many Browder File episodes. And as we wind down, I want to remind you of the importance of self-knowledge, the importance of self-love. And as Maurice White, Earth, Wind, and Fire says, one of my favorite groups, says that, you've got to learn to love you. You've got to unearth all the beautiful things around you, trees and birds. And he says that if there ain't no beauty, you gotta you got to make some beauty. Have mercy. Listen to me, y'all, right? And so that's something that we have to do. So we have to be about making some beauty and loving yourself, which is the greatest love of all. And he just cut it off. So I didn't have a chance to end. So that's the end. All right. All right. So I will stop the edit here. Thank you, sir.
Did you take that?
I recorded it, and I'm stopping the recording right now.
To hear it at some point.